Okay, hello everybody, good evening. I want to begin a series of broadcasts. It will probably be a series of broadcasts. Let's see how far this will go, of extreme importance. And I had many reservations if to do such a project, such an endeavor, such a series of broadcasts, or not, for a long time. And I think it is simply necessary now to do this. Now, the thing is that we have in humanity today many forces, many civilizations and worldviews. Some of them are spiritual worldviews, religious worldviews, that are clashing with one another. And the thing is that partially one of the reasons why they are clashing in such a way is because the forces that come to represent these different civilizations are sometimes, or not sometimes, usually composed of people that have a very mild understanding of their own civilization, not to speak about that they hardly have any understanding of the other civilization. And therefore, some part of the confrontations arise not because of real confrontations between the civilizations themselves, but because that the lowest degrees within these civilizations are the ones leading and driving the forces, and are usually driven by disinformation about their own civilization, and disinformation for sure about the other civilization. And this situation becomes extremely dangerous. Now, to who are these broadcasts directed? These broadcasts are not directed to those who want to hate, to those that seek war, and to those that seek violence. First of all, because for these people there is plenty of other venues where they will find things better suited for themselves. And second of all, because these people will never listen. However, the broadcasts are directed to those who want the opposite. The ones that seek true peace, the ones that seek true religion, the ones that seek true communion and service of God. For them, these broadcasts are directed, even if they are maybe a minority. We do believe that these forces, the good forces, exist, and that these good forces have enough power, if they will unite and work together, to overcome the forces of evil. And we also believe that these good forces exist within all the different civilizations together, meaning this is not the sole belonging of one civilization or the other, in the sense that there are good Muslims, there are good Jews, there are good Christians, there are good atheists, okay? And if these people would come together, our world would become a better place. So even though we are dealing here with Islam, we will deal here with the Quran, and we will read it from all sorts of different viewpoints. The broadcast is not directed necessarily to Muslims. Even I would say, not necessarily, but it is, I would say, an interfaith discussion, in which we will try as best as we can to represent a certain bridge between different worlds, let's say, on this subject, with the hopes that the general direction will be for the good. Okay? It is not a clash here between Judaism and Islam. It is not a clash here between this viewpoint or the other. It is simply out of the hope for peace and for truth. Now, when I say truth, it means that we will also not shy away from saying things. We will not shy away from saying things. If we think that it is necessary to say them, even if it will not find favor in the eyes of radical people. Okay? Because as we said, radical people will not want peace. If we are talking about peace, and we are talking about honesty, this will, of course, interfere and bother them. But it is not necessarily what we will consider. And sometimes they hide their lust for war and their lust for barbarism with religiosity. This is something that needs to be put boundaries to. Anyway, let's maybe draw a small picture, okay, before we start. Because again, as I said, it might develop into something quite long. So I prefer to make a good preparation work before we even start, to explain what we will do and what we will not do in this podcast. Okay? So basically, for the purpose of our discussion, the world is schematically the relevant world. The relevant for this discussion is more or less divided into 4 groups. Let's draw the 4 groups as we see them. Okay. So, we have the Jews, the Jewish religion. Okay? We have the Muslims with their religion. We have the Christians with their religion. And we have, let's say, the seculars. Let's call them like that. Okay? With their religion. And each of these groups has its agendas. Each of these groups has its faith. And as I said, each one has its leaderships. And sadly, for us in our so-called modern world, what happens is that usually the leaderships of these groups hardly fully understand their own culture, their own religion, their own faith, their own books that were given to them. Not to mention that they do not understand the others. There are very few people in the world today that have deep understanding of even one of these groups. Not to mention a true understanding of the interconnections between them. There are very few people like this. And usually, the more deeper understanding a person has, the less representation or, let's say, political power he has. So what we have today is a very miserable situation. Okay? The most underdeveloped groups within all these different sections of society are the ones leading the processes. And if this will continue, this will bring us to a very dark places. In the sense that in our view, the way we view the map, the problem is not one group or the other. It's not the Jews. It is not the Muslims. It is not the Christians. Rather, the problem is that in all of these groups, the most underdeveloped people are the ones that are leading the events. And they are pushing away the ones that are more developed, the ones that are deeper. And in this sense, the war is not at all between Muslims and Jews, or Israel and Palestinians and whatever, and so on and so on. The war is between each and every one of these groups, between the more developed ones and the less developed ones. Okay? Now, the more developed ones, since they are more developed, it's much harder for them to come into action. It's much harder to arouse them and give them the power to overcome. That is why the situation today is so complicated, because the good forces hidden within all of these different cultures is dormant. It is not currently being occupied by the less developed. So that even though we are supposedly in a modern world, in our modern world, the most barbaric forces are ruling over all the different civilizations. Now, the more developed components of the cultures, they have the ability to create harmony and discussion and communication between each other in a way that will bring peace. Okay? So in our worldview, the war is not at all between cultures. In truth, the ones that are more developed and the truly developed components of all these different civilizations, they understand that war is not necessary at all. On the contrary, the different cultures and civilizations can complement each other in such a way that they will uplift each other and actually complement each other and contribute to each other in a way that could be harmonious. So the real war is not at all between the different sects or the different civilizations or the different religions. The real war is between the developed and the underdevelopment and the underdeveloped powers within each and every one of the different societies and groups. Okay? That is why it is so complicated. Now, the purpose of these podcasts that we will start, hopefully, God willing, inshallah, to engage in is an attempt, an initial attempt, that maybe also will not be a perfect attempt, to start engaging, even in the slightest possible way, such a process of discussion and uplifting of the good forces within each and every one of these civilizations. It might be utopic, it might be wishful thinking, but it is truly what we believe in, yes? So, this is the first thing I wanted to say about the purpose of this podcast. Second thing. The second thing is about our religious views. Okay? According to our religious views, let me say it like this. None of what is currently perceived as the mainstream religions, neither Judaism, nor Christianity, nor Islam, in the way it is currently perceived, is perfect. None of them is perfect. Why is it so? It is not to God forbid to say that the religions themselves are imperfect. But you see, religions, by definition, are a mixture of two things. First of all, it's the books, whether it be in Islam the Quran, or in Judaism the books of Judaism, or in Christianity their own books, and so on. But a book always depends on the reader. A book by itself might be holding very deep truths. But when it comes to religious books, the kind of truth that somebody will take out from the book might be very different depending on who reads the book. Who is the reader? And if the reader himself is flawed, even if the book is perfect, the reader might not derive the truth that is within the book. And it applies to any book in the world. It doesn't matter if it is the Quran, or it doesn't matter if it is the books of Judaism, or in any other book. Okay? If the reader is underdeveloped, the amount of truth that he will extract from the book might be, first of all, underdeveloped, or second of all, it might be completely flawed. And that is the danger within religion. Again, even if the book itself is perfect, but the reader is not, the reader might not get the right guidance from the book. And taking into account that the mass religions of today, and the mass doctrines of today, and the mass political parties of today are led by the most underdeveloped within society, these underdeveloped leaderships take people astray from the right path, even if they think that they are on the right path. Okay? That is why it is very much dependent who reads the book, who reads any book. Just a moment. Okay, so this is the second thing that we wanted to say. By the way, in Judaism, this is a very guiding principle. In Judaism, it is said in the Talmud that the Torah itself, the Bible itself, contains two facets. One of them is a facet for life, and the other one is a facet for death. In the sense that if the interpreter himself, the one that reads the book, is by himself not of pure heart, the Torah, the Bible, or the religion will take him astray instead of the correct path. It will take him on the wrong path. It's also hinted in the verses themselves that God goes with those of pure heart in a pure and innocent way, and with those that are stubborn, he takes them intentionally off the right path. That is why when we come to religion, we should come with a lot of fear. People are under assumption, oh, I read the book, I read the verses, I am certain that I understood the verses correctly, therefore I am guided, therefore I am already on the straight path. where they should be very, very fearful that they are truly reading the books with a pure heart. If they read them with a not pure heart, not only they are not guided, they can be misguided even though they are reading a book that should guide them. But deep, deep, deep inside, if they do not want the guidance, the book will turn into something that will take them astray, take them off the path. So this was the second remark that we want to make. The third remark that we want to make is that, at least from the point of view of Judaism, and we will discuss this many times ahead, there are many paths in which a person can reach to heaven, okay? In which a person could reach to his purpose in the eyes of God. In the sense that Judaism is absolutely not exclusive, meaning that according to Judaism, Judaism is a religion for the Jewish people, but the other religions can definitely take the true believers to heaven. Okay, so in this case, and we expanded on this in a different broadcast, at least from the point of view of Judaism, there is no war, religious war. There is no such thing. Okay? Concept of religious war does not exist in Judaism. According to Judaism, there is more than one path to heaven, and it is written clearly in the books that, for instance, a person can be Christian, and if he is a true believer, he will, and an honest believer, he is entitled to heaven. And the same thing with Muslims. The same thing with Muslims. Okay? So, when we are talking about an interfaith dialogue, this is the first and foremost thing to say. Everything we will say afterwards is just an addition on this. Okay, so this must be the first and foremost starting point, building block for everything we will say. Nothing we will say will ever come to undermine the fact that we believe that at every given moment, any person from any other faith, yes, assuming that he is an honest person and a true believer, is destined for heaven. There's no dispute about this. Okay, so we, God forbid, do not come to undermine the path, the spiritual path of any individual, of any person, or of any civilization, God forbid. Okay, this is not, absolutely not the way of Judaism. Meaning, nothing that we will say here will have to do with some sort of discussion or argument of which religion is the right one, which one is the correct one. Not at all. Okay, this is not a discussion of an argument in order to nullify or cancel the other or the other's faith. Not at all, God forbid. Okay? So everything that we will say in the continuation can be viewed as an opinion. It can be viewed as how would I say? Complementary dialogue, let's call it like that. But it is not, God forbid, to cancel or to put criticism on the faith of any person, assuming that he is honest. Okay? And out of the faith that really, the really ultimate purpose is that all humanity will come to its perfection, God willing, all people that wish to connect to God will be able to do so according to the paths that belong to them, and will have reached the perfection of their souls, which can be done in many different ways. This is the third point I wanted to make before we even start discussion. Nevertheless, I would mention that in Judaism, the general belief is that in the future to come, what we view as the institutionalized religions as we know them will undergo a certain change, including Judaism. Okay? In the sense that in the future, there will be a certain added spirituality, that we have some hints of what it will be, that will cause a general radical change in the ways that all of humanity views spirituality. And in this sense, to a certain extent, the institutionalized structures that we associate with religion will undergo a dramatic change. And this is hinted in the words of prophets of Judaism. To a certain extent, this is also hinted in Islam also, and also in Christianity. Yeah, we all have the concept of the world to come. In Islam, there is the concept of the Mahdi. Okay, that in the future there will be a very strong spiritual cataclysm that will create a change from the reality in which we currently live in. Anyway, so with the help of God, let's try to start this. And again, as I said before, we will not shy from saying the truth. Okay, so we will say things the way they are, and not try to hide things. So as you know, the Quran is divided into suras, sort of like chapters. And they go from the longest ones to the shortest ones. And the opening verses of the Quran are the Surat el Fatiha, the opening verses that are more like a prayer. It's a very beautiful prayer, actually, asking for guidance. Yeah, guidance from God. Now, you see that this already connects to what we have said before, because the Quran itself instituted in the beginning of it a request that when you open the book, you will be properly guided. If any persons that would have read the book would have immediately attained the truth, why would the Surat al Fatiha be required? So as we see, Muslims are encouraged to ask for guidance even before they open the book. Why? Because if a person reads, just like we said that there could be the portion of death. Because if the person will read any kind of religious book without proper guidance, he might come to false conclusions. He might come to dangerous conclusions. By the way, also in books of Judaism, we have such prayers. And also before making any kind of religious action, Jews actually say a similar prayer. This prayer is the prayer of unification. That it's a declaration that we are doing this religious action for the sake of God. We request that the action will be for the sake of God. Why? Because even if you make a religious action, like for instance studying religion or making any kind of commandment or anything of this sort, if your heart is not in the right place, there is a worry that even if the action itself is religious, you will make it for the wrong purpose. Therefore, you ask for guidance. Also, there are certain rabbis that instituted in the beginning of their books, especially Kabbalah books, books of Jewish internal teachings, they instituted somewhat similar prayers for guidance. The very famous prayer of Rabbi Isaac Luria, Rabbi Yitzchak Luria, the Arizal, that is of a similar nature. Yeah, guidance, request for guidance before opening the books. Okay, so let's hear it.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين.
Okay, so that of course was the Arabic. Let's read the English. Okay. In the name of Allah, the most compassionate, most merciful, all praise is for Allah. Allah is God, yeah, Lord of all worlds, the most compassionate, most merciful. Yeah, also in Judaism, in Arabic, it's called Rahaman, yeah, and also in Hebrew, yeah, Rachim. In Arabic, Rachim, Rachim, and in Hebrew, Rahaman. Yeah, El Maleh Rachamim, God full of mercy. Very similar, yes. Master of the Day of Judgment. You alone we worship and you alone we ask for help. Guide us along the straight path. Here you see the first verses of the Quran are a prayer to be guided along the straight path. Why? Because God forbid a person could be guided on the wrong path. If God does not find him in favor, the person could think that he is guided by God, but actually he will go on the wrong path. And the path of those you have blessed, not those you are displeased with, or those who are astray. Okay? So, a lot of people are certain that they are guided by God, but they might not be. Okay? They might not be. They might not be. Okay. Now, let's begin with the first surah. Now, let me mention something that maybe some Muslims would not be so happy to hear. But as I said, we should say it anyway. Islam associates the prophecy of Muhammad, salam alayhi wa salam, of blessed memory, with the angel Gabriel. Okay? So Islam tells us in advance that Muhammad did not receive his prophecy directly from Allah. He received the prophecy from an angel. Now, also in Judaism, we have prophets that have received their prophecies through an angel. Okay, the most famous example is the prophet Isaiah, right? The prophet Isaiah, he received his prophecy through an angel. That's the way that the first verses of the book of Isaiah begin with. Okay, so if you will, let's open the prophecy. And again, I will not take here into a consideration or respectable consideration those people within the Muslim world that say that they do not open the Bible because they do not believe that the Bible is true or stuff like this. I don't see a reason to take this kind of views in any kind of seriousness. Okay, in their places, they can do whatever they want. But here, this is not the place for that. Not at all. And therefore, again, I said, if you are this kind of people, then these podcasts are not for you. But again, those who want peace and those who want true dialogue, these podcasts are for you. Anyway, so let's open the book of Isaiah, chapter 1. Okay. Just a moment. Or maybe I have something else in mind. Just a moment. Let's take our time with it. Okay, let's look. Maybe it's not the first chapter. Here. Yeah, it's Isaiah 6. Okay. Yeah, so Isaiah sees the seraphim and he sees the angels and so on. Then one of the seraphim flew to me with a live cord in his hand, which he had taken with tongues from the altar. With it, he touched my mouth and said, "See, this has touched your lips, your guilt is taken away, and your sin atoned for," and so on and so on. Okay? So, also in Judaism, we have some of the prophets that have received the prophecy through an angel. Now, I'm not sure how it is in Islam, but well, I think that the prophet, the term prophet, the term Nabi, is one word that describes all types of prophecy, all types of spiritual revelation. In Judaism, we discern between different types of prophecy. Okay, and in general, those types of prophecies that are received through an angel are, well, I don't want to say it, but I will say it, are considered lower than prophecies that are received through God himself. Okay? So from a Jewish point of view, even if we accept the spirituality of channeled through Muhammad, the fact that the Quran declares that it is given through an angel labels it as a degree of prophecy that is lower than the degree of Moses. Okay? Let me explain this again. And I know that maybe Muslims would not like to hear it, but nevertheless, as we said, we are here to say the truth. If you will see in the Bible, Moses receives his prophecy directly from God. Okay, so meaning that when Moses see the burning bush, or when he is standing on Mount Sinai and so on, his relationship is directly through God. Okay? Well, in the other case, in the case of the prophecy of Islam, the prophecy is mainly channeled through the angel Gabriel. And this means that from Jewish point of view, this prophecy is of a different kind, even if we accept it as prophecy, of a different kind of nature than the prophecy of the Bible. Okay? So let me just show you that this is described in our books. Okay? Try to locate the book. Where should it be? Just a moment, I will locate it. Now, of course, it does not hinder from the importance just by itself, yes, because as you see, I've told you that one of our central prophets, Prophet Isaiah, also received his prophecy through an angel. Yes, but nevertheless, it is still different than Moses. Let's see where it should be. It's probably one of these ones. Maybe here. No. No. Just a moment. Okay, so this is written in books of the Ari, the great Kabbalist. Okay, but let me try to locate the book. Okay, anyway, this way or the other, this is not what is really important now. It's not, God forbid, in order to discredit the prophecy of Muhammad, but just to mention that from a Jewish point of view, the prophecy through an angel is a different thing than direct prophecy from God. Okay, now the first verse is the Alif Lam Mim, which, as you know, Muslims claim that they do not know what is the true meaning of this. They say that in the future to come, as far as I remember, they believe that it is the Mahdi that will interpret for them what is the meaning of this Alif Lam Mim. In Judaism, we do have some interpretations of what these letters mean in Hebrew, Alif Lam Mem. I am not going to discuss this today, even though it is written in our books, but let's leave it for a later time. But let's start with the verses themselves.
ذلك الكتاب لا ريب فيه هدى للمتقين الذين يؤمنون بالغيب ويقيمون الصلاة ومما رزقناهم ينفقون والذين يؤمنون بما أنزل إليك وما أنزل من قبلك وبالآخرة هم يوقنون أولئك على هدى من ربهم أولئك على هدى من ربهم وأولئك.
Okay, so already in these first three verses there is some very meaningful things that we need to discuss. This is the book, there is no doubt about it, a guide for those mindful of Allah, of God. Okay, so the book begins with declaring that it comes to guide, okay, comes to guide people in the way of God. And pay attention, it is written a guide, okay? A guide, not the guide, a guide. Who believe in the unseen, establish prayer, and donate from what we have provided for them. So far, this is wonderful. Yes, sounds great. To believe in a higher source, establish prayer, and donate from what we have provided for them. Wonderful. And who believe in what has been revealed to you, O Prophet, and what was revealed before you, and have sure faith in the hereafter. So this verse 4, is extremely important for us. Why? Because pay attention. The Quran itself requires in its first verses, the third verse of the Quran, that Muslims would believe not only in what was revealed to Muhammad himself, but to what was revealed before him. Okay? Let me say this again, just so we will be on the same page. Islam does not come and say the prophecy of Muhammad obliterated everything that came before him. Okay? Meaning, contrary to what most Muslims try to present, it doesn't come and say there is now the Quran, and the Quran nullifies everything that came before the Quran. No. Contrary to that, Islam requires Muslims to believe in the prophecy of Muhammad and everything that came before him. Now, what came before Muhammad? Is it not Christianity and Judaism? So, not only that Islam does not declare, at least in the first pages of the Quran, an overall total war against all the spiritualities that came before and the religions that came before, but it tells you need to believe in it. Okay? So this is already very good news for us, and it's also a question, how come that things have shifted from this to such an extent? Now, to tell the truth, this must be clear. This concept, this disinformation concept that people have in the Muslim world, outside of the Muslim world, and so on, that Islam is a contradiction of everything else, simply does not. It's not historically true. It doesn't fit the history of things. Okay, because it's not only that we are talking about the time of Muhammad himself, but if we are looking throughout history, we see that, for instance, Jews and Muslims coexisted together peacefully many times throughout history. Not only coexisted together, they have contributed to each other's culture and strengthened each other in quite remarkable ways. Okay? So how come that in our so-called modern times, we have fell to the biggest barbarism in history that has never been ever in any time in the world? Okay? Hamas, ISIS, and so on, they convinced the whole world that Islam is a jihadi doctrine that requires the obliteration of everything that is non-Muslim. Well, simply this is not the historical truth. For instance, we said that Hamas views themselves as the continuations, the followers of the Caliph Umar ibn al-Khattab. And they want to re-establish his caliphate over Israel and Jerusalem and so on. But what they do not know is that the first actions of the Caliph Umar when he came into Jerusalem was to reopen the gates of the city to Jews. This does not really fit with the cannibalism, barbarism of Hamas. That is why we said that the supporters of the underdeveloped belief are the enemies of all humanity, including the enemies of God himself. They are contradictory to God's word. The same thing with ISIS, that views themselves as the continuation of the Caliph Abu Bakr, and so on. Or those ones that view themselves as the continuation of Salah ad-Din. Salah ad-Din, his own doctor, the doctor of his son, was the Rabbi Maimonides, one of the biggest rabbis of Judaism. And he enabled him and contributed to him and assisted him in writing his books. So, how do these terrorists exactly fit this into their worldview? That their own models not only did not hate Jews, but actually contributed to the development of Judaism. Salah ad-Din, at the time of Salah ad-Din to a certain extent even financed the writings of the books of the Rambam, of Maimonides. So how can these terrorists come and say that they are the followers of Salah ad-Din? How? By the way, sometimes the Rambam wrote very, very, let's call it critical words regarding the religion of Islam. Some of the things that the Rambam wrote are from the most critical things ever written about Islam, not, God forbid, out of disrespect of any sort. But, nevertheless, he wrote it from the center of the court of Salah ad-Din. Did Salah ad-Din behead him? Did he eat his corpse like the terrorists do, like Hamas do? No. So how come around 1,000 years ago the world was much more tolerant and enabling for coexistence, okay? That Jews and Muslims could coexist together in such a way that from the center of the most powerful Muslim court, a Jewish rabbi could write such controversial things and did not fear for his life. On the contrary, he was respected by Salah ad-Din. And today, I assume, if somebody will write even half of that, not in a Muslim state, in Europe, he will be in trouble. Not necessarily physical trouble, but he will be in trouble. So how come that in our so-called modern age, we are so barbaric and primitive relative to what was 1,000 years ago? And again, you see, the Quran himself commands Muslims to believe in what was revealed to Muhammad as Muslims, but also to what was revealed before him. Now today, if you will come to Muslims and you will show them the Bible, they will say, the Bible was twisted by the Jews. And you will talk to them about the Zabur. The Zabur is not meaningful. It's not the Quran. The Zabur is not the Quran. We do not believe in it. Yet, according to the historical testimonies, until not long ago, Muslims did pray from the Zabur. Definitely did. So what happened? What happened exactly in society that things shifted and collapsed into such a low state? Okay, Muslims definitely prayed from the Zabur, so much, but let me give you an example. The Zabur, just to make it clear, the Zabur is the Psalms. It's the Jewish books from the Hebrew Bible of the Psalms written by King David. The Psalms that are being used by Jews, being used by Christians, and has been used until recently also by Muslims. Let me give you a historical account. Much before the country of Israel was established, there were travelers that traveled to Jerusalem. We have documented books from them that document their travels, sometimes from hundreds of years ago. And one of these travelers, of course, he didn't have any kind of political agenda because it was much before the modern world politics of State of Israel and so on. He described the way Muslims prayed on Temple Mount in the Al-Aqsa Mosque. And he writes that Muslims come there only one day in a week, on Friday. They take their shoes off, and only the most elder are allowed to come in, and they take in with them the Zabur, the Psalms. They read there from the Psalms. So how come, let's say 400 years ago, Muslims did pray from the Zabur, from the Psalm, and suddenly they say, no, this book we do not believe in. It's not the real books of David or whatever. So he tells them, so where are the real books? They do not know. Okay? So something here is not okay. Something has been twisted. The Quran itself, in its first verses, requires Muslims to believe in what was given before Muhammad, just as they believe in what was given to him. Meaning Islam does not come to nullify the spiritual teachings that came before him. Otherwise, many parts of the Quran will become almost hardly possible to understand. Stories that clearly come from the Bible, clearly are based on the Bible, clearly require some knowledge of the Bible. If you do not know the Bible and you think the Bible was written by Jews, so you're not allowed to read it, how can you read the Quran? It's a mystery. So maybe they do not read the Quran, they just think they read the Quran. And they take from it only the worst that they can take. Not that they take the worst, they just, because they are unguided, it becomes full to them. It takes the worst out of them. Okay, so I think that we will stop here at verse 4, because God willing, this would require many broadcasts. So, have a nice evening, friends. Goodbye. And with the help of God, I hope that this